I want to give a big shout out to my patrons, especially my Kingsguard, which include Henrik, Brendan, Nick, Oscar, Stuart, Josephine, Ikaika, Amanda, RJ, Shad, Nicoletta, Tanner, Jennifer, Frank, Jay, Sarah, Pat, Kevin, Ryan, Michael, Terrence, Wade, Darren, FM, Derry, Boss, Mitch, Sebastian, and Benjamin. Thank you all so much. You're the best. Welcome back to the Fantasy Network, everyone. My name is, of course, Jimmy Nuts, and today we're going to be reviewing the third book in the Sun Eater series by Christopher Ruocchio, and that is Demon in White. This will be a no-spoiler review, and then after that, I'll be doing some spoilers and diving in. The no-spoiler section won't be as long as usual, because 3 books into a series, what can you really say without spoiling anything? But I do have some overall thoughts that I'd love to shout out to readers that are thinking about reading this or are waiting to get to Demon in White. Book 4 is right around the corner, Kingdoms of Death, and it looks like it's going to be pretty amazing for where we leave off here. There's a lot of big stakes at play for Hadrian and friends, and I am just absolutely enthralled by this series. And to get into the non-spoiler pieces of this review, I just have to say that I love the fact that this is the book where I feel like the bigger players within the empire of this massive civilization out in space, we're starting to see those bigger players and getting a better idea of what the political landscape is in the empire, and I'm here for it. I think Ruocchio is really good at this type of thing, and he excels in Demon in White whenever he's portraying a lot of those conflicts. And you might hear that and think that this is just an all-political book. That's not the case at all. In fact, if you thought Empire of Silence was a little bit too methodical, or you thought Howling Dark was a little too slow, I've seen people who have enjoyed the book said, I had a little tough time getting into it, but once it got going, we were good. Folks, Demon in White is the total opposite. This pace will rip your eyelids off. It really will. In fact, I'm someone who actually does enjoy methodical books. This was so polar opposite of what I was really expecting. But man, the stakes were raised, and it just out of the gate, once it hits that first big moment, it does not stop. It is blistering, and I think that if you had at any point thought that maybe the series could use a little bit more oomph, it's here in Demon in White. And while the other books did have, combat and action, and I think those are very well paced in my opinion, this really excels when it comes to that sci-fi space combat. If you're into that big scale, this kind of had that feeling while still always having that little bit of humanity into it, right? And callbacks to the old ways of doing things, siege engines and such like that. Just really cool stuff. I like the way Ruocchio does his combat a lot, and there's way more of it here, I think, than any of the other books. At least it felt that way to me. Biggest note that I can make about Demon in White, among the blistering pace, the cool combat, the politics at play with the Empire at large, big players, it's the fact that the character progression for Hadrian and friends, as I will refer to them, is really astounding. I really mean that. I think that this is some of my favorite character development in anything I've read. And out of all of the books that I've read, I can only think of maybe a handful, maybe on one hand, that have made me go, wow, or what? Left me speechless, or blew my mind. And Howling Dark had 2 of those moments. Demon in White consistently was blowing my mind. There were times where I was just staring at the page like, what? What just happened? And in 2 different ways, the ooh and ah way, and then also in the heady sci-fi way that a lot of people enjoy. I'm a sci-fi nerd. That's the stuff I like. I like headier sci-fi. And we get a lot of those really cool ideas. But it's all through the frame of Hadrian and how Hadrian is growing. I believe in the person that Hadrian has become through all the books and the time jumps and the events in this world and this story. And I feel like the legend is about to be born. And we know from the get-go that he is a legend. He's a Sun Eater. But now I am starting for the first time, instead of just listening to the story be told to me, I'm starting to think about the consequences of the person telling the story now. Present Hadrian is really starting to come into my focus as a reader, and I'm starting to think about that a lot more than I was back in Empire of Silence and in Howling Dark. And that is because Hadrian is different. He's just different in this book, and so are his friends, Volca and such. So I do think that there's a lot of great character progression here, and it all feels natural while happening in the most fantastical, science-y, heady way possible. It's wild. Folks, you gotta check this out. I really think this is something special. I do think that this series has something about it. There's a mojo here, and the way it's told, the way it's written, on paper, and when you read it in the audiobook, they're so fantastic. It's all coming together. And I really believe that this is a story. And if you're like, thinking about picking this up or something, maybe this will put you over the edge, because I'm not really here to convince people to try things or whatever, right? I don't really think about it like that. I just kind of give my thoughts and tell you my experiences. I make my way through reading in this journey. But this is one of those series where right now it's kind of big in our little niche here in the review community, but it's not massive yet. I think that in the coming years, this has the potential to be major. I think that it has the secret sauce, that recipe that people look for. This could be major in the coming years or decades or whatever it is, and I could see it being listed among the great works of sci-fi, but also in an adaptation sense, I could see this working out. So like, I just want to put that out there, that when I'm reading this, these mind-blowing moments that I'm getting, they're not just one-offs where I think, oh, that was crazy. You know, these are things that are sticking with me, and there's just something about the whole package that Christopher Ruocchio has presented us here in Sun Eater. There's something different. And I'm going to continue to try to put my finger on that as I read these books, and I will eventually reread. The rereadability of these, that's a tough word, is outstanding. Absolutely there. There's a ton of value. You're going to get a lot of value out of your money when you buy these amazing hardcover books, by the way. But yeah, I just had this gut feeling that this is something that is going to end up being extraordinarily popular outside of our niche, but as a whole. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But this is the first time I think on this channel I've ever made that distinction. There are things that I say I love and I think that are great and genre define, all these things, but I've never really put my hat in to say I think something's going to be like a major success. But if I had to pick one out of the newer stuff that I've read in the last, 5-10 years, this is it. Outside of obviously like Stormlight Archive, duh. That's already happened. But I think Sun Eater, like, you could be on the ship early for this one, and then be able to tell everyone that you told them so. So, I don't know. That's just my gut feeling. I know I'm rambling praise and whatnot for this non-spoiler thing. I do want to mention one thing that I did notice in Demon in White, and this has happened with some of my other favorites. Robin Hobb, I think, is the best writer ever, right? And she does this. So this isn't a bad thing, but this is something that I have noticed. And it is, there was a major event that happened in the books, and we consistently refer back to that moment as it pertains to the relationship between Hadrian and someone else, knowing that person was there for that. And it's a consistent reminder to us that, hey, they were there. Hey, it was a big deal. Hey, and everything's changed. And it comes up like quite a bit in the first half of the book, to where I'm like, okay, like, you can trust me to remember that. However, I do think that signposting is very important. I don't think it's bad to relay that information. And like I said, some of who I think are the best authors of all time do it. So it's not a objectively bad thing. It's just a personal thing for me. I like a little bit of a longer leash as a reader, and I like to kind of, be rewarded for paying attention. But it's always good to repeat information that is going to be important down the road. And this is a monumental piece of information between two characters. So without spoiling anything, that's all I can really say. That does happen here. I felt like I should mention it because I did notice it. It did bother me a little bit, but I don't think it's like objectively bad by any means, or really a con for most people. But for me as a reader, it just is. Outside of that, Demon in White, 5-star book. I like it just as much as Howling Dark. I think they're in the same story. They have a lot of the same strengths, but they're in two different lanes, and that's because of the pace. I think Howling Dark is a lot more almost like gothic and very methodical, whereas Demon in White is just in your face the whole time and does not let you get away from it. It just grabs you and doesn't let you go. I think they're both outstanding, fabulous books, and I love Demon in White. And that's going to pretty much wrap up all my non-spoiler thoughts. If you're going to head out of here, because if you don't want to hear spoilers, go ahead and hit like on the video. I would appreciate that. And drop down in the comments. Let me know, are you going to be reading this? Is it on your TBR already? Have you read the other two? What's going on with that? But with all that out of the way, I want to talk about some of these mind-blowing moments and things that I really enjoyed about Demon in White in a spoiler context. So now we're talking spoilers. So Sarani Dorakai, is that how you say it? It's Dorayakai? I don't know. The Scourge of Earth. I thought that the introduction of this, like, we've already seen visions of this. Hadrian has talked about, the Pale Prince with the crown and all of this. But even him not even being on page, but just being mentioned on page, carries such a weight. And I love the naming conventions in Sun Eater, even if I can't pronounce Seriani, or however you say it. I just think it was amazing, but also seeing Pales with human shields and different types of weapons, and speaking the human tongue, that made it feel like, okay, because the Cielsen are so interesting, but like as we go on, we need to continue to keep them fresh, and that is a great way of doing so, and giving them a figurehead. I absolutely adored all the inner monologue we got with Hadrian talking about the differences between the Cielcen and the humans and how everything about them is different. It just makes me very introspective about possible life in our universe and how it would be different from us, not just from a life form standpoint, whether their heads are different or whatever, but how they go about civilization. The quote I want to read is, "We built our structures massive and to reach to heavens, whereas Cielcen built down towards hell." Humans building up, building the skyscrapers, trying to reach the heavens, where Cielcen were going to hell. And what imagery is that, right? The demons of the Cielcen. But are they demons? I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm not saying like literal demons, but like in their eyes, they're the good guys. They believe that what they're doing is right. And they're really fighting against their extinction because, as we know, they know that Hadrian is trying to get rid of them so the quiet can be spawned. It's really mind-numbingly amazing, but also very confusing. I kind of like that piece of it, but the differences between the two races are really highlighted more in this book than any of the others, and I love those pieces of the story. And here's a question for you, the viewer. If you know the answer, please go down in the comments and let me know. But the Cielcen seem to worship the quiet, like we've heard that multiple times, or the Watchers. Clear this up for me. They know that the quiet and the Watchers not the same thing then? Am I missing something here? Because they know that Hadrian's kind of working for the quiet by the end of the book. And they know like Hadrian has to get rid of them so the quiet can spawn, or do they not know that single detail? This is where I got a little bit confused, and I'm just admitting it here, and I would love if someone had the answers for me down in the comments. Okay, the Eubala fight was so damn good. And this is where the book, I mentioned the no spoiler, this is where the book took off. But that fight was the best fight so far in the series. Even the climax of this book, I didn't feel as up for it as this. Now, the moment where, the big laser and Hadrian, okay, yeah, that's there. But I'm talking about just the antagonist getting into a fight, Hadrian having to figure out. This might have been like one of my favorite parts of the book, to be honest with you. So we beat Eubala and all this stuff, but we get an introduction. So I think it's Selene or Selani, I think is how Ruocchio pronounces it. That's cool. I think like the whole dynamic between Selene and Volca and Hadrian is interesting. It's not necessary. I know it's like technically a love triangle, which I despise. You know this if you watch my channel. But this is something that would happen back in like royal times, and this being kind of based, all the historical influence is cool. Like I could see something like that happening, marriage out of duty and such. And also making the right moves to not piss off the wrong people. That's pretty big. So I actually liked that whole dynamic. And I think Volca is just such a breath of fresh air when we talk about female characters, because Volca is like, a strong, independent woman, but not in like a cringy type way. And also she understands a lot of the struggles that Hadrian is going through before his position at court, and all the things that he's going to have to face going forward with his legend building. And Volca's just so smart. I don't know. I love Volca. I might like Volca. I said this last time. I might like Volca more than Hadrian. But we get another character introduced here, and I would love to hear your opinions if you're reading this. Alexander. What an interesting character, and a really necessary one, in my opinion, for Hadrian's character development. I think their relationship is, again, one of the brightest points of this book. But whenever Hadrian talks all that smack on, I don't even want Alexander here. The kid's nothing but a brat. And Alexander's there. You've done it. You're talking about, then they come around the corner. You're like, oh, they heard everything I said. It made my stomach hurt. It took me back to like middle school. That moment, he captured that perfectly, the emotion of it, because I think most people had an embarrassing situation, even if it's not that. I just felt the shame for Hadrian, and yeah, it sucked. It sucked in a good way. But Alexander is fascinating, and knowing that there's this really pivotal moment of, him hearing Hadrian, who I think he looked up to, talking smack on him, is going to have, it's going to have impacts later on, clearly. And then seeing Hadrian's tape of him being brought back and saying, that's not true, that's doctored footage, it's edited, there's no way. And then he starts to think that his mom was correct and the Empress was correct. And just that whole dynamic, I think, going forward into Kingdoms of Death and all the other books, Alexander and Hadrian's relationship is the thing I'm most interested in now. Because we did get a good amount of answers for the quiet. Not all of them. Like, I'm still obviously in tune for that. Or tuned in, rather, for that. But
Alexander and Hadrian's conflict coming out of this book is the thing I'm most excited about moving forward. And I think Alexander's just an awesome character. Obviously, he's a little bit frustrating, but very good. And speaking of the Empress, take that whole Colosseum scene and just inject it right into my veins. Oh my God. So this was one of the oh my God moments as well. We've already talked about Ebola fight, but the Colosseum moment, forget the fighting of it. It's just, one, the character progression that's shown off here that I talked about in my no spoiler section, a lot of it happens right here. Because Hadrian's thinking about how he wants to react and how he's so mad, and that Marlow rage or whatever he calls it. This is huge on how he handles this situation. And then obviously he has the duel. The fight's fantastic. But it's the fact that I wondered, in my Howling Dark review, I said, well, why was the arm switched whenever he got resurrected? Why was it? Well, it turns out that if he had had his other arm taken in this, he would have died in this duel. The Quiet saw that moment and they reversed which arm he lost. This is where I'm starting to freak out a little bit. And like I said, I'm just staring at the pages drooling half of this book and just watching all this crazy stuff happen. But the fact that the Quiet had seen this and now we're starting to realize that the Quiet, obviously we know that they're from the past, from the future or whatever, but this is a direct application of that affecting Hadrian. Wild stuff. This is the heady sci-fi stuff that I love. After that, I knew it was going to happen. I'll be honest, I knew Gibson was going to come back. But even with that said, when he came back, I literally yelled at my book. I was holding it sitting on my couch and I just scared my cats and just yelled. And I've done that with a couple books. This is now one of them. I knew it was coming, but seeing Gibson come back is so awesome because he's been so impactful on Hadrian as a character. As we progress through the story, and he's always thinking about him and learning lessons from him, and I love Gibson so much. And this whole library archive thing with him, I ate it up. I love characters reading books or finding books in my books. It's redundant, it's like book inception, but it's just something I'm really into. And I loved hearing about how the AI preserved human life, and then getting too much brain power is a bad thing, and that exiled English King William, I think it was, defeats them, but we find out that he had, another alien species helped him defeat that. I thought that was awesome. I'm here for it. I'll be honest, if Ruocchio wants to write a prequel and write that, I would read the shit out of that. That's the book I want to read, to be honest. But I'm gonna be totally transparent with you. When they find the Declaration of Independence, I was just I laughed. I was now Hadrian in my head's Nicolas Cage. That National Treasure stuff. I'll be honest, that's the first thing I thought of. I said, well, there it is. Nicolas Cage stars in Sun Eater. He is Hadrian Marlow. Nicolas Cage does it again. I don't know. The Declaration of Independence, it's cool. I actually like the tie back to America. I think it's cool. But that moment just it's kind of I talked about the Silicon Valley thing in San Francisco in the last one that kind of took me out of it. The Declaration of Independence, for some reason, just thinking about Nicolas Cage messed me up a little bit. But I liked all of that scene a lot. Then the entire Horizon conversation was mind-blowing. Again, another mind-blowing moment. But I'm not sure if I got all of it. And then it all ends with the Hadrian talking to the freaking Quiet. What? And this is where we find out that Hadrian has to kill off the Cielcen for the Quiet to be born. Is born the right word? Or spawned? Or whatever. What? And this is where my question is but don't the Cielcen worship the Quiet or the Watchers? Are those not the same things? I'm getting a little confuzzled here. And if as that wasn't enough to confuse me, Hadrian's powers, what? Gets back on the ship, puts the pistol, but tells the bullet to pass through him. That's some OP stuff, right? That's overpowered. I'm here for it, but what? And it's crazy to think that's all leading up to the climax, the big fight. And the climax was absolutely ridiculous in this book. Rip, my boy Udax. Udax, you know what? I was sad. It's fine. I kind of wish we would have got a little bit more because him and his people and his race, I thought those were so interesting. And I like the fact that it was someone not just immediately someone that's earning respect for Hadrian. He ends up sacrificing himself, so it's a really nice contained arc in this book. So I'm down. I wish he would have survived. Ruocchio did my boy dirty. I liked it, but man, it hurt. Udax was awesome. Valka gets her brain hacked. She better be okay, or I'm gonna write nasty emails to Christopher Ruocchio. For real, Valka is the best. I really, really hope she's okay. She better be okay. But I do think it's important to talk about the main part of this climax. And it's not Basander Lin being back. He gets every bone broke in his body. Fine. I'm glad he did something positive for humanity, but Basander Lin, But it's more that Hadrian's powers, like I talked about, are so absurd. In a good way, by the way. I don't mean that negatively. But he gets shot with this laser that's going to wipe him out, and everyone sees the fact that he's not harmed by it. He's able to basically make himself immune to the laser, right? He like splits time, and walks different paths of when the laser does it. It's crazy stuff. But in that moment, I have a lot of questions. The main being, where do you go from here? Like, all of this is so fantastic. I'm in, okay? But I do have concerns of how are you going to relay the stakes now that Hadrian is, I mean, a super being of sorts, right? You know, he doesn't get harmed by the laser. It's like, what? He can't get shot with the pistol. He sees all these things. So how do you put him in predicaments now where I can feel the tension? Because one of the things that Ruocchio has done very well in these first 3 books is building tension, even though I know Hadrian somehow survives, like, to the end. There are questions about cloning, like maybe he clones himself. I don't know. Whatever. The tension's been good in this series. So I feel like there is a little bit of a chance that all of the tension now comes from people like Volca or Udax, who did pass. But, like, we're going to see people around Hadrian to start collapsing. I think that's, you might only be able to do it in that way. Like, you're going to see the price of being this super being type person, which is cool. I think exploring those consequences is very valid, and I think it'll be a fun story to follow. It's just, I wonder, like, what's next? Like, how do you up the stakes from here? I'm not sure. I imagine he's going to have some sort of equal, whether that's the Pale Prince or somebody else. I don't know. But those are questions that are going to have to be answered. Now, I have a lot of faith in Ruocchio as an author, so these aren't complaints by any means. It's just like, I want to see how he answers these questions and rises to this occasion, because this is going to be a big challenge going forward. And I only ask these questions because I just ate this up. And I wanted to keep getting better, but how? How? Demon in White is probably the best book I've read this year, folks. That and Howling Dark, so far. So that is big praise, because I've read a lot of really great books this year so far. I know it's a little bit early, but how is he going to outdo himself next time? I'm just happy that I'm caught up for book 4, to be honest with you, and I can join the ranks of other people who want to talk about it. I know I didn't get to every single nitty-gritty detail of this. I wanted to keep it a little bit shorter, already going a little bit long, but maybe we'll have discussions about Sun Eater on the channel. There's a lot to talk about here, and I know Jake Bishop has done this, Lena's Library has read this, Alex, so there's a lot of people who are getting excited about it, and now I'm also one of them, which is awesome. I really love this series. I think that it's going to be a big hit in the coming years, and I think it could have longevity to go into decades past today, which is awesome. So hats off to Christopher Ruocchio. Excellent job. And if you like this review, go ahead and hit like. I'm sure you're already subscribed, but if not, think about subscribing. I would really appreciate it. There is a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but again, always appreciated. And until I see you next time, be good, be safe. And remember to always keep turning the page.